So welcome, Rand. I'm really excited about this conversation today. Kind of after reading about your story, I felt like, okay, I need to dig in deeper to kind of mine some of your life forces. What got you there? Where you are today, what got you to where you are now, and maybe you can just, and I've had guests in the past. I've got guys who were Vietnam War helicopter pilots, and I've had nuclear submarine commanders, and everyone has a story, and I want to lean into yours. So, Rand, you have the microphone. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about you and your background, and I'm here to listen.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much. Yeah, I've never started out this way before, but at 68 years old, I was looking in the mirror in a very bad place in a very drunken fog that I had been in for a while and thinking my life was over. It was over. And I was still working as an attorney at the time, but no, actually I wasn't. I had already retired.
Okay.
And I had no idea what my higher power, I guess you would say, had in store for me, and it changed my whole life dramatically. So that I got sober May 6th of 2014. So I've been sober a little over 11 years.
Congratulations.
And I had had a really good life pretty much up until my early 60s, and alcohol just took over. I grew up in a family in Adams, New York. Our father was a Mustang pilot in World War II, came home, had me and my brother got polio,
Wow.
and he was paralyzed from the waist down the rest of his life. So we were very, very poor. I had a very early resentment against poverty. And I had two brothers and a sister. My younger brother, Ron, is a year younger than me. And, we struggled. And I got drunk one night and ended up in the Marine Corps a few weeks later. And 9 months after that, I was in a rice paddy in Vietnam going, I think I screwed up.
Right. It was that last drink, right? That
God.
yikes.
Yeah. And my brother was a combat veteran in the Army. And so we both served our country pretty well. We both got banged up quite a bit. I came home. I knew what I was going to do. The Marine Corps commissioned me. I got what they called a combat commission in Vietnam for a couple of months. Ended up becoming a real officer. I went to OCS, Officer Candidate School, and I ended up being a JAG officer.
Wow.
Judge Advocate General. I was a legal attorney in the Marine Corps with no college degree or anything. And I went off to the JAG school, and there was 100 lawyers there, all captains, because they made them captains when they graduated from law school. And here I am, a second lieutenant, the little bronze bars, and this pipsqueak from, oh yeah, he's a Vietnam vet, but we'll show him. Well, guess what? I busted my butt, and I ended up being the honor man of the platoon.
Wow.
I got the highest score, and it gave me a foundation for the rest of my career as far as what I was going to do. And I ended up getting married and having kids and got out of the Marine Corps and went to college at Syracuse, got my BA, and then I got my law degree. The funny part, too, about this part of my story, Michael, is that when I came back from the war and all these things had happened, I got into a really bad situation. One time we ran out of ammo. I had to use my bayonet. I mean, I saw some really grisly stuff. And so here I am. I'm in college. I'm working. I've got a wife and a couple of kids. And I'm thinking, you know what? I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. This is amazing. And I've got a lot of friends that are dying from alcoholism. A lot of guys really suffered when they came back from the war. And some of them just didn't make it, And then I started having I would start out with a horrific nightmare where I was in a battle and I got sliced open. Imagine that. And I came out of that nightmare screaming. My wife was on the floor. She had flicked the light to the bathroom. And all of a sudden, I'm not on the battlefield. I thought I was in the battlefield. I had been cut with a bayonet by an enemy. Wow. And I was covered with blood. And I could smell my innards. And I'm trying to put them back in me. And I can't. And I'm like, you're done. This is it. This time you're going to die. And then my wife flips the switch. And we looked at each other. And we knew our lives had changed. in a really bad way. And I wasn't covered with blood. I was covered with sweat.
Yeah.
I was smelling my innards because I had voided myself and the bed was a mess. And in those days, there was no PTSD, there was none of that stuff.
Right.
So after that, I started having horrific, I was not as well as I thought I was, I had that. So I started medicating with alcohol, particularly at night after the kids went to bed and all that kind of stuff. And I was a hard worker and had a lot of success in my career as an attorney. My brother came back from Vietnam. Our mother's best friend was Edie. Edie's 14 years older than my brother because she's our mother's best friend. She's divorced with 7 kids. And the next thing I know, my brother's riding around in a Cadillac with this lady, Edie, gorgeous lady, with a mini skirt, red cowboy boots, and they're going line dancing and having all this fun. And my brother is like, wow. And he married her.
Wow.
Yeah. And they moved to Utah, got involved in the Mormon church. My brother became a commercial airline pilot and, had a great life. Ron ended up after Edie had a stroke in 2011. And then she had a whole bunch of she never got better. She got worse.
Mm.
So for 6 years, my brother just took care of her. He wouldn't let anybody else take care of her. And then she passed. So Edie's gone. He's got 7 kids, right? Stepchildren. But they all looked at him as their father. And 27 grandchildren and 27 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
So he's got this huge family. And I went out to Utah to see him. I had never gone out there. They'd lived out there for 40 years. I would see him every year. They would come here east and in the summertime and we'd hang out, and I would drink and my brother would drink and we made fun of Ronnie because he's a Mormon and he can't drink. And, we had a good relationship, but it wasn't much of one really.
Right.
And so when Edie died, I went out to see him and he looked at me. We were hiking in the desert and he looked at me. He goes, I'm going to hike the Appalachian Trail. Now, Ronnie's 71. He's my younger brother. I'm 72. This is in January of 2018. I said, yeah, well, that's great. I had hiked some sections of it, and we both were good hikers. I didn't realize how much he had done. He was a really good hiker in Utah, and I ran 26 marathons. I mean, we both had kind of a good physical foundation of taking care of ourselves pretty much. And although I had an artificial knee and some injuries, I limp. So I limped the whole Appalachian Trail. So I asked him, when are we going to go? And he said, March 22nd. Well, this is the end of January. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. There's no way. I said, what are you going to do? And he said, I'm going to take a bus down to Springer Mountain and start walking. And I said, well, that's not going to work. Because I knew. And I wasn't going to let him go by himself. He was not in a good place. So that's how we started out on this adventure to hike the Appalachian Trail at 72 and 71 years.
So I want to just kind of dial back just a tiny bit. You talked about, at age 68 where, alcohol had I guess came to that point where you realized that alcohol was a problem. And how did you come to terms with that? And how did you what kind of help did you get to help you deal with that monster?
Well, actually, I realized it was a problem in my late 50s, early 60s. My friends thought of me like a functional alcoholic. I worked hard during the day. I was really good at what I did, actually. I never had any problems. I was self-employed for 40 years. I had a bunch of people working for me at times. And so I had a great career, but I was really worried about screwing up because alcohol was taking me over. Alcohol is a disease. A lot of people realize it.
For sure.
Yeah, the American Medical Association defined alcoholism as a disease in 1956 because they realized that alcoholics metabolize alcohol differently than normal people.
Right.
Our bodies, when we're drinking, create an excess of acetone. It's a complicated process, but that acetone is what gives you that feeling that you're thirsty. And when I started drinking, I would lose control. I would plan, I'm just going to get drunk tonight like I used to, and tomorrow I'll be all right. And I wasn't. I couldn't stop. I could not stop. And that's what happens. Alcoholics, we start drinking. I could be on a 4 or 5 day bender, and all I've been doing is drinking maybe watching TV and doing some stupid stuff, and pass out, and then come to and do it again, and 3 or 4 days later, I'm headed to a detox. I'm thirstier than I was when I started. How the
Wow.
hell? Excuse me, but how does that work? Yeah. So it's a disease. I had it really bad, and when it finally I lost control, I had to get help. And I went to a program. I'm in a program, and in the book I described the book that I wrote about the Appalachian Trail, which is journal style. It tells exactly how we did it day by day, where we went. Pictures. I took 5,000 pictures. There's 500 pictures in the book, and in there I also talk about how I recovered from alcohol. And my brother, talks about his grief, and we talk about spiritual things that happened to us on the trail. By the time we went, I was sober 4 years, so I had a good base. I had done the program with a guy who was a mentor. I was involved every day. Right now, today, I'm still going to, we call them meetings. I go to meetings a couple times a day. A lot of times, I'm always working with guys. I'm giving back how I learned to be sober.
Yeah.
It's an anonymous program, so I can't, I can't be specific, but
Sure, of course.
yeah.
At age 72, you are in, what was it, in Georgia where it starts?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So there you are standing on Springer Mountain.
Right. Yeah.
What were you thinking?
Well, number one, it was snowing. I was thinking, and my brothers didn't know this is what I was thinking until he read the book that I ended up writing, 3-4 years later. This isn't going to happen. I'm thinking, I'm going to stick this out for 2 weeks, and by then we'll be done. We'll just, because I had artificial knee, I limp. If I had I thought if I do the Appalachian Trail, I will get the award for being the limpiest man that ever did the Appalachian Trail. And
how long is when you started out, what was the idea that it was going to take you how long to do the trail?
Okay. The Appalachian Trail is 2,190 miles long. It goes through 14 states from Springer Mountain, Georgia to Catadin Mountain in Upper Maine, right above the 100-mile wilderness, they call it. It goes over 600 mountains. 300 of them are named. About 3 million people hike some part of the Appalachian Trail every year, but only between 2,500 and 3,000 actually try to do the whole thing. And of that, about 17%, around 450 people every year do the whole trail. Now, we did not do the whole trail in 1 year. The first year we made it to 1,460 miles, something like that. And by August, I just remember the end. It was one of those days where it was 100 degrees, right? 100% humidity, walking. We averaged 11 miles a day in the mountains, which is incredible. So we would start at daybreak and usually get done sometime in the late afternoon.
So where did you wind up on, in August, where, when you decided to stop for the year? Where were you?
Actually, we were in New Jersey.
Okay, up in Sussex County, right?
Yeah, so like I said, we did 1,460 miles. And we went the 30-day stretches twice, averaging 11 miles a day. We had 2 vehicles, so we didn't do it. Of the 450 that do it every year, a lot of people do it different ways. There were other people out there younger than us in our 60s, and it turned out one of them had an RV and a driver, and they were going, because there's roads that cross the Appalachian Trail about every 10 or 15 miles, somewhere in there.
Right.
So we took 2 vehicles because we figured out, well, we can start at Springer Mountain, and let's say the next day we're up on a road with our vehicles, right? And how we did it was that Ron every morning he would go and drive up to the next road. Sometimes that could be 50 miles and take you an hour and a half.
Right. Because
you're in the mountains. It's not interstates or anything like that. A lot of times dirt roads. And then he would hike south and I would hike north. So we would meet in the middle of the day and say hi or whatever. And then he would go to my truck because I had left my truck where we were. And then he would drive around to the next where his car was. So when I came out, we would just stay there, right?
Right. So you're leapfrogging
Right. That's
now.
how we did. Not all. There's lots of places where you have to carry a full pack and go overnight and all that. The Smokies, there's two 35 mile sections. There's a place called the Priest that was 35 miles. So we had to carry a full pack and do it the traditional way on those areas. But I mean, it was hard. I carried a 20-pound pack every day because I carried a lot of water. I had a first aid kit and things. A lot of people were not really very experienced that were trying to do this, and so people would get dehydrated or hurt or things like that. And it was a son of a gun, but we had a ton of amazing experiences, Michael. It's
So,
just
so I'm really curious, like, because I'm interested in hearing like some of the experiences that you had along the way. But where I guess what I'd like to start with is, what did you find out about you?
well, I found out I was a hell of a lot tougher than I thought.
Okay.
And my brother too. We're both gritty guys. I mean, we're not big men. We're both 5'8". We both weighed around 180 pounds when we started out. There's nothing magical about us as far as physicality goes, but we have that kind of a military, like one step at a time. That's one of the subtitle on my book and that's a mantra of the alcoholic recovery program that I'm in. One step, you can do this you can stay sober one step at a time, one day at a time, that kind of a
Right.
thing.
Right.
And
So you had grit.
we had grit. When I got really down, I would just say, hey, you son of a gun, nobody's shooting at you. You've done harder stuff than this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So just go, just do it. And we could do that. We could muster that kind of drive. You got to be crazy though. One night, my brother and I are sitting there, and my brother goes, bro, there's a lot of weird people out here. And there are a lot of, but I looked at him and I said, hey, bro, we're all weird. And he goes, we're not weird. You and I are normal. Well, I know I'm an alcoholic, so that makes me a little weirder than most, but no. And I said, no, everybody out here is weird. No, normal people don't do this, bro.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Let me walk, 2,000 miles. Why not?
Yeah.
So maybe share some of the, some of the more interesting or eye-opening discoveries for yourself while you were on your trek.
Well, I took pictures every day. It's funny because one of the things I enjoyed the most was I was like, every time I was doing, I was thinking, you're never going to come this way again. Just take it all in as best you can. My brother was more about, he hardly ever took any pictures and he just kind of marched. He was just, I'm doing this, like a forced march type thing. And for me, it was more about, I'm going to enjoy every minute of this that I can. And so I took a lot of pictures. I took pictures of animals, of the flowers and the scenery. You'd walk around the corner and you go, oh my God, look at that. One day I was sitting on a rock on top of a mountain watching the raptors. I could have sat there all day long watching these huge, and they were coming right over my head. And another hiker walks up and looks at me and goes, Rand, do you know you're sitting on that rock? There's a copperhead underneath it, a cottonmouth. It was a cottonmouth.
Wow.
I go, what? Yeah, there's a cottonmouth right up between your feet. Oh, yeah, there is.
Wow.
It was lucky because it was a cool day. I actually have a picture of it. It's in the book. So I very carefully got up and moved away and then took a picture of that. But I think it was pretty much almost dormant because it was a little chilly.
A little cool.
There wasn't really any danger on that. But one day I walked around the corner and there's a black bear coming right at me. This is in the Shenandoah National Park in Virginia. And this bear is like 15 feet in front of me, and he stops. He freezes. His paw is in the air, and I'm looking at him, and I stop, and we're like, and his head is like the size of a basketball, and this animal is huge, and his head is like at my chest, right? But he's 15 feet away, and I'm looking at him, and I think, that is the most beautiful animal, the most beautiful beast I was just fascinated by how beautiful it was. This fur was the blackest black I ever saw. It just glistened. It was amazing. And I couldn't take my eyes on, and he's staring at me. And I reached back to get my phone. You know, I used my iPhone. I took all my pictures on my Apple 7 iPhone. Brought it out. I want to take a picture of him so bad. And he just whirled and went boom down the trail, and then off the side, like in a second and a half. I didn't even get a picture of his butt. He was going so fast. And he goes off the mountain. Now, the day before I had seen a bear, it was way ahead of me, and it just kind of went off the trail and out of sight, no sound, no nothing. I went up the trail as fast as I could. I want to take a picture of it. Never saw it, never heard a thing. This bear went down the mountain. It sounded like a bulldozer. I mean, rocks, you can hear rocks are flying. It sounded like trees were being knocked over. And another hiker comes up behind me and goes, "What's that?" And I said, "It's a bear. He was right there." And he goes, "No way." And I showed him the tracks. Yeah.
Wow.
It was amazing.
So what I think some people are, what's the right word? They're uncomfortable in solitude. They're uncomfortable in the quiet. I mean, I know that you were hiking with your brother, but I have to assume that from time to time that you weren't talking with each other, that there were times of great, especially if he was walking in one direction and you were walking in the other, that you were there just alone in nature. What was that like for you? Just that experience of just that quiet, that alone, that, just you and yourself in the universe.
I enjoyed it a great deal. I had a lot of time to think. I thought about, I was in a recovery program that tries to make us be a better human being and not just be a reformed alcoholic. And I made a connection with a higher power. My brother was a bishop in the Mormon church.
Okay.
He didn't drink. His whole life was way different than mine. My life, I've been married 4 times, divorced 3 times. I mean, my personal life was chaotic compared to my professional life because I focused on that pretty much. I was a pretty good father. I mean, I always had a good relationship with my children. They had no idea what I was going through. They didn't know about the night terrors. They didn't know about any of this stuff. But, being in the woods now in the beginning, there's people everywhere. So you're not alone very much the first few weeks, for sure. But then after a while, the herd thins out. And by the time we got to Harper's Ferry, which is about halfway, the other interesting too, Michael, is about half or more of the people in the beginning are women.
Really?
Yeah, women. There was one girl out there with her 4 kids. The youngest one was 5 years old. I don't know if they made it or not because we only saw them you get into a bubble where you're kind of with the same people on a daily basis for a while, and then somebody takes a day off or something happens, and my brother and I just never stopped. Tomorrow we're just going to have a 0 day, right? And then every time the next day we'd be looking at each other. What are we going to do? Sit here all day long, So we just go. But then after a while there was long periods, especially towards the end when we got up into the white. Whole days would go by. I wouldn't see anybody. My brother tended to see a lot more people than I did because he was going against the flow.
Right.
I would get into these areas where there wouldn't be anybody around. And I just mostly, I prayed a lot. I still worked with guys, believe it or not. Guys would call me in the morning. I'd have a set time. I'd turn my phone on and talk to them, make sure they were all right, stuff like that. So I kept stayed connected with my recovery program. My brother he had some horrible situations. He really struggled a lot with his grief from ED. He had a very spiritual experience one day, and it was the darkest day, probably the whole hike. It had been raining. It was just, the woods were like black. It was like you needed a flashlight in the middle of the day.
Wow.
My brother was in a really bad place, and this one ray of light came down, and there's a picture of it in the book. And he felt like Edie was talking to him, telling him it was going to be all right. It was very profoundly powerful for him that she's all right. I'm going to be all right.
Yeah. It's those miracle moments, right? Of just connection into the universe, right? It's, Yeah,
I was,
I don't know if there's words that really could capture it.
yeah. One night I was convinced I was going to die. It was in the Smoky Mountains. We were going from, I was at past Clingman's Dome. On this occasion, when we did the Smokies, I actually went south and Ronnie went north because he went back down to Fontana Dam, and I went basically from Route 40. So it's like 75 miles stretch. So we were going in a long opposite direction. And the shelters were full. And it rained for the 6 days we were in there. Only the sun came out one day. So it's nothing. Well, you were walking in the fog. And I decided one day I was going to go right till dark. And on the map, it said there was a place called a False Gap. Well, a gap is normally between two mountains. It's a low spot. And it usually broadens out and you can pitch tent there and everything else. Well, it was called False Gap for a reason. There was no gap. And when I got there, it was on a stretch. The trail, the top of the ridge was at most 20 feet wide. In some places it was only like 12 feet wide. And it literally dropped off thousands of feet on both sides straight down. I mean, it's unbelievable area of the Appalachian Trail in the Smoky Mountains. So I pitched my tent right on the trail because it's almost dark, and put the stakes in the grass part and got in my tent, and then these horrific winds came up and rain. And in the middle of the night, I woke up. It sounded like freight trains. I mean, literally, Michael, freight trains coming up the mountain, and they would go one side of me or the other. And I go, oh my God, because there's nothing to keep me on I felt like I was in a body bag.
Wow.
I felt like I was back in the war, where we used body bags. My tent is like a body bag. And then freight train would come, and it would be coming right at me. And my brother said, what were you doing? Hanging on? I had a mountain tent. It was like for Mount Everest. They had overlapping rods that went through the roof to hold it together in high winds. But I said, were you hanging onto the rods? I said, no, I had my hands on the stakes on one end and my feet on top of the stakes on the back, trying to make sure that the stakes and the tent and the rods are beating the crap out of me. And at one point, I'm like, you're going to die. This is it. You're done. There's no way I can withstand this, because it just kept happening over and over. And I was praying to God, if this isn't it for me, okay, but I'd really like to be around to help some people some more, And finally, just at daybreak, it let up. I'm like, holy crap, that was scary. And then I'm talking to one of my guys on the phone, because that's what I did, in the morning. And he goes, are you all right? And I said, yeah, I'm all right. It was a rough night. But he says, well, I've been watching the weather. They had tornadoes where you were last night.
Wow.
Now, I didn't get caught up in that, or I wouldn't have survived for sure. But for me, that was an amazing experience. It was scary. I have never been that scared before, even when people were shooting at me.
Wow. What was the best part of the hike for you?
There was a couple. One was Killington Mountain in Vermont. That was a 13-mile hike that day, and I don't know, something about it. I was in pretty good shape for a change. I wasn't feeling physically, I just had a great day. I enjoyed it. Killington Mountain isn't right. The trail doesn't go to the top of Killington Mountain, but when you get to the base, as high up as it goes, there's like 0.2 of a mile up. It's a rock slide. It's huge rocks. You have to climb up it to get to the very top. And I got up there, and there was two hikers there, through hikers, and a couple of ladies that were there up there too. And I had them take a picture of me, standing at top, holding my poles up like victory. And you can see all of Vermont. It's an unbelievable picture. I sent it to you today in an email, and it's in the book. Yeah. And then I came down, and Ronnie was supposed to meet me, but he was coming out. I could just tell he was having a bad day. He was not. It was hot, and he said, what's it like up there? And I said, oh, man, it's fantastic. And he goes, you take pictures? And I said, yeah, I did. I took a lot of pictures. I had some guys up there took pictures of me. He goes, okay, that's good. So we went back down to where the stone house was on the Appalachian Trail, and I went north, and he continued on south. Well, these two lanky guys came down behind me, and they're a lot faster and a lot younger, right? And they passed me a couple times, but they kept stopping, and we never stopped. We just kept, no matter what. Anyway, towards the end, I had like a mile to go, and I got into these rocks. I didn't know they were behind me. I fell down every day, Michael. And usually it was in the late afternoon. It was in the afternoon towards the end, and I would just get so fatigued. I'd start staggering around a little bit, and then all of a sudden I'd find one of my poles was between my legs, you know. And sure enough, I mean, I was exhausted, and I fell into the rocks. I mean, and it looked really bad. And I heard then somebody scream when I fell, but I managed to go in and kind of dive into where there was some dirt. And these two legged guys come running up, and they go, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." They said, "Boy, that looked bad. We thought you were dead." So that was a good day and a bad day.
So the name of your book is A Spiritual Passage. So how do you connect the title? How does that title, kind of relate to your experience?
For me, it related to my experiences in recovery, where I made a connection with a higher power that took away my obsession to drink alcohol. That was a huge deal. I mean, people don't know how hard it is for an alcoholic to stop, even with all the help in the world. It's very difficult. So I described that in the book, and I did it. Every third chapter is basically about my recovery and what my sponsor did for me and taught me how to make a connection with a higher power and do all, they call them steps, 12-step program. And I did it. I did it to the best of my ability, and it worked. So I wanted to explain that. And that's one of my strongest desires, that the book can be available to help people. It's come back to me from some people that they have given the book to people that were struggling. And in 2 cases, I've been told it turned their lives around, you know. So I'm trying to, use my experience to help somebody else see, well, this guy can do this at 72, or, and he gets sober at 68. You know what? Maybe I can too.
Yeah. It's interesting in having created Chapter X and talking with a lot of men who are going through, this transition from career to life after career. And, a lot of guys who are, it's like struggle with what's going to be meaningful, what's going to give me purpose, once I'm no longer my job, once I'm no longer my title. And, it's for me to see, and hear your story, how you've found at least part of your purpose, right, of helping others, and how important giving back is, and how important it is to be that model and mentor and guide and coach, and having that attitude of, I'm here for a reason, right? I think that's remarkable. And I think it's something that certainly should be inspirational for other people to say, hey, what's my excuse for not finding something meaningful, or some way to give back, some way to help someone else? And, I could see, there's just so much gratitude in you. And that's, that to me makes this whole story experience so rich and so meaningful. So it's quite astounding, Rand. And I'm really grateful to have you share this story with me. And, as we get ready to close the conversation for today, I want to offer you the last word of anything you'd like to share with the listeners. And again, I'll remind the listeners that it's Rand Timmerman who wrote the book, A Spiritual Passage. And I'm sure it'll be available in the show notes, and to find out more about Rand. So Rand, I will leave the rest up to you to bring our conversation to a close. And as I said, I am super grateful to you for your courage and your willingness and dedication to helping others.
Oh, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I just never forget being 68, looking in the mirror and thinking I was just the lowest of the low life on the planet, and I was no more use to anyone. I enjoyed being a lawyer. I love being a lawyer because I was helping people, but I was getting paid for it. So there was that aspect to it. But then I had no idea what was going to happen to me, that I would not only become by doing certain things and be developing a spiritual relationship with a higher power, I would become the man that God always wanted me to be, at least to some extent that it's humanly possible, right? And now I can help people have much better lives. And my hope is that there are a lot of people at the end of their lives, particularly, or even young people today, with all the challenges they have with drugs and all kinds of stuff, that they end up where I was at 68, they're at 32, looking in the mirror thinking, I'm not worth anything. Well, that's not true. That's not true. We can change our lives completely and have a great, great life and do amazing things. You know, at 68, I'm nothing. At 70, I'm starting to write books, you know. I'm working with guys every day, and my life just keeps getting better and better and more fulfilling. I'm 80 years old now, and I feel like I have hopefully another 10 years that I can actually help people because of my experience. That's the best thing I have.
And you know what? And that's what a lot of people don't recognize, that they can make a difference outside of what they did for a living, outside of what they did for a career, just by being there and being open to whatever possibilities exist. So it's a remarkable story. And Rand Timmerman, as I said, I am super grateful, and I can only encourage everyone to read Rand's story and follow his work. Thanks so much, Rand.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's show, please give us a review on iTunes. Each review helps us get our message out to more listeners so they can begin to craft their next chapter. For more information or to get in touch, visit michaelfk.com. Until next time.